So what do we mean when we talk about organizational health? Well, there are three parts. The first part is members know, and they know three things. They know what we're doing, they know what I'm doing, what my role is, why I'm doing it, and what my individual responsibility is. What I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and what my responsibility is. Members enjoy what they do. And members live the organization's values. Now let me make a quick note, and I appreciate the fact you all are taking notes. I want you to get a hold of something. This does not mean that you or I would necessarily agree with everybody's values. It doesn't mean that you or I would enjoy necessarily working at that company. What it does mean is that at that organization, employees in that organization, they know what to do, they enjoy what they do, and they live the organization's values. And the word we use for that is alignment. We say an organization is aligned when people in the organization know what to do, they enjoy what they do, and they live out the organization's values. And folks, this was a big part of what changed at Apple. For those of you who have done some reading, you know that that's the truth. One of the big things Steve Jobs did when he came back, he brought alignment. Now, I read some stories about Steve Jobs. I'm not sure I would have wanted to work for the guy. Right? But he brought alignment. And the people who stayed at Apple enjoyed what they did. They knew what their role, and they knew why they were doing it. So let me ask you a question. Someone comes to you, someone in your organization, some of you are CEOs, some of you own your own business, some of you are students. Someone comes to you and says, hey, I've got an idea. It costs nothing. It's easy to understand, and it's readily available for all of us. And it could potentially give us an incredible advantage over our competition. Why would you not do that? Are there reasons why you wouldn't do that? Think for a second. Can you think of any reason why you wouldn't do that? Say again?
If it was unethical.
If it was unethical, right, so it didn't fit your organization's values. That's a great point. Anyone else?
I think most people don't just do things just because they're hard. Maybe it requires some effort. Doing things differently, change is difficult for people.
It might be change. Yeah, change is sometimes difficult. What usually change is difficult, right? And so that might be a deterrent to doing something, even though it's free and readily available and easy to understand. In his book, The Advantage, Patrick Lencioni talks about 3 biases against organizational health and why companies don't get more involved with organizational health. We have found it serious. We have found these biases to play out. And it's hard to fight against these biases. Because folks, the things I'm talking to you about, the things that Chris and Judy are going to talk about, they're not hard to understand. Anyone can get a hold of the concepts. They make sense. They're not hard to implement. But they do take uncommon levels of discipline and persistence. And that's difficult. It's hard to stay after it day after day. And so the 3 biases, the first is sophistication. You don't need an MBA to understand this. If you don't have to, have an advanced degree. You don't have to have a lot of experience. A lot of this just makes sense. The second is adrenaline. Organizational health is not going to pop up in your inbox Monday morning and say, if you don't take care of me today, the company's going to go out of business. It's not going to pop up and say, hey, you've got a $12 million opportunity that if you act this week, you'll be able to take advantage of that. It's not a firefighting kind of thing. And let's face it, it feels good at the end of the day when I've left and I've taken care of problems. I worked for Kimberly-Clark for years, worked as an engineer on the floor, and I cannot tell you what a rush it is that we would have a problem that morning when I walked in. In fact, I remember getting a call at midnight, Saturday night. Went in and, in my mind, pulled the superhuman to get a machine back up and running. It was a rush. It was just awesome. It fixed the problem. It got people going. I walked out of the mill a hero. People Monday, they were saying, dude, way to go. Nobody went up to the plant manager and said, hey, way to go with organizational health. The adrenaline bias. The last is quantification bias. It is difficult. It is not impossible. It is difficult to put a number on what organizational health does for you. One of the things I do admire about Apple with their current CEO, Tim Cook, he constantly talks about their culture that they've created and it being a contributing factor to their success. The billions of dollars they have in cash at their organization. It can be quantified. It is difficult to do. So let's talk about the 4 disciplines. The first, and Chris is going to pick up on the second. The first is build a cohesive leadership team. Chris is going to talk about creating clarity. Judy's going to talk about over-communicating clarity, and then we will finish up with a discussion of reinforcing clarity. So, building a cohesive leadership team. I want you to take a look at that picture. Does that remind you of any teams you've been on? Can everybody kind of relate to that? I'm sure glad the hole's not in our end. You know, in other words, that ain't my problem. That ain't my problem. And I know I've talked with some of you in your organizations, you struggle with this because you've got people in your organizations that take this attitude. It's not my problem. So how do you fight that? Well, the first step is to build and create a cohesive leadership team. Build a cohesive leadership team. Patrick Lencioni talks about this in his book, The Advantage. He wrote a book prior to that called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I would recommend, if you have not read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it ought to be mandatory reading. It would have answered a lot of questions for me if I'd read it early on in my career. It really is a game changer. There are 5 steps that he talks about for creating a cohesive leadership team. The first is to create an environment of trust. This trust is not the kind of trust that says, hey, I can loan Vince my car and I know he's not going to damage it. That trust is important, but that's not the kind of trust we're talking about. The kind of trust we're talking about says, I know that what Kerry's doing is in the best interest of the organization. I know I can trust him that when he says something, he's saying it because that's in the best interest of our team. that's in the best interest of our organization. That's critical because then and only then can I understand and embrace healthy conflict. And let me be really clear with you. Conflict is good. If you're on a team or you're in an organization that does not have conflict, you are not healthy. And I'll explain that in a minute. But if there's an environment of trust, then you and I can have open, frank, honest discussion about what's best for the team and what's best for the organization. I know that it's not personal. I know that you have the best interest of the organization at heart. And so, because of that, I can then, because we've had open and honest discussion, all the ideas have gotten on the table, then we can have true commitment. I've told this story a lot. I was in a big meeting at Kimberly-Clark. There were literally millions of dollars at stake. And we sat around the room discussing, walked out of the meeting, long meeting, walked out of the meeting. I can remember it like it was yesterday. We were walking down the hall. A buddy of mine was with me, and he says, I don't think that'll ever work. Really? And I asked him, I said, why didn't you say something? And he said, well, it would have made a difference anyway. Now, I'm not justifying my friend's attitude. That was the wrong attitude to have. But what I want you to hear is an environment of trust had not been created. So he did not feel like he could speak up honestly and convey his feelings. That means that not all the ideas got on the table. And so he wasn't committed. Think about some of your teams you've been on, even if it's sports teams. Sports are great analogies for team play because it boils everything down to the moment. How many times have you broke a huddle not wondering whether or not that play was going to work? How many times you walk back out, the coach has called for a certain play on the volleyball team, and you're not sure that's going to work? That's because there hasn't been true commitment. And you don't have true commitment because you don't have healthy conflict. There isn't open discussion, and you haven't had open discussion because you don't have trust. And so, because there's no commitment, I'm not accountable. What my buddy was saying to me was, it ain't my problem. I'm glad that hole is not an iron in the boat. Right? But if we've got accountability, then now we can focus on results. And folks, that's really what matters, right? We've got to get things done if we're going to make a difference. We've got, and it doesn't matter if you're in the for-profit world or non-profit world, you've got to get results. So, what we do at Cirrus is we will spend time initially working to create a cohesive leadership team. There are a number of things that we work with. I want to share just a couple of things with you this morning. How many of you have had some kind of a personality profile done? Most of you? Okay. There are a number of tools we use. One is the DISC profile. Some of you may have had a DISC profile done. There are some other tools that we use. DISC is not necessarily the most in-depth. It is one of the most portable and easy to understand. In fact, I sometimes tell my folks, if you walk out of here today, you've never seen this before, you can use this afternoon. I will tell you, be careful. A little knowledge sometimes is dangerous. You have a handout in front of you that should look something like this. On that handout, talks a little bit about the 4 personality styles. I want as you look at the disc, what we try to do is help people work through where folks are coming from. What is driving them to act and say what they act and say. On this circle, the top half, the D and the I, those people are fast. They want to make decisions fast. You know people like this. Just make a decision. I don't care what it is. Make a decision. We'll fix it later. Some of you have worked for people like that. Okay? On the bottom half, those people are steady. Let's get the data. Let's put together a plan. And then let's make it work. Okay? Neither one's better or worse. Each have strengths and weaknesses. The left half of the circle, those people are very task-oriented. They're going to tend to question everything. They feel good at the end of the day if they've gotten everything on their to-do list done. That's a successful day for them. On the right side of the circle, those are people. These are the people that they start out their emails. Hey, good morning. How was your weekend? How did things go with you? How's everything going? Tell me about your kids. Again, strengths and weaknesses. There's not anyone better than the other. What I want to do, we're going to quickly, very quickly, just run through each of those and kind of see some of the strengths and weaknesses of each one. Some of you may recognize yourselves if you've had one of these assessments, and you'll be able to see yourself again. The D is dominance. These folks are people who like to be in charge. Only about 12% of the population are Ds. And that's a good thing, because these are the people who start wars. Almost every war in history has been started by a D. They want to be in charge. They want to run things. They want it to go fast. Just give me the answer. Don't give me the fluff. Give me your answer. I don't care. I don't care how you feel. Tell me what the answer is. They are, and again, they've got strengths. If there's a crisis, you want a D. Chances are a D is going to get you out of a crisis quicker than anybody. Okay, there's a fire in the building, the ship's going down, whatever it is, you want a D in charge. You don't want anybody thinking, you want people reacting. So, if you want to direct and delegate with them, if you want to direct and delegate, you need to give them broad authority. We're talking now for somebody who works for you who's a D. Give them broad guidelines and give them authority within those guidelines to work. Okay? Be very direct with them. Basically, give them something to do and get out of their way. Okay? Don't micromanage these folks. If you want to create a motivating workplace for them, let them work independently. You've got to challenge them. And give them opportunities to compete. Challenge them with what's at stake, what has to get done, and talk to them very directly. If you've got a D and you need to develop them, you've got to talk to them about how this plan benefits them. Okay? A D, if you talk to a D about improving, typically he or she is not going to hear you because they don't need to improve. You need to improve. The problem is not me, it's you. Okay? So help them see how this improvement benefits them. Okay? Let them determine their own personal goals and provide a lot of challenges for a very results-oriented approach. If you're working with a D, express a lot of confidence in them. D's like to hear, hey, you're doing a great job leading. I love the way you take charge of that. You will have a D will be your friend forever if you talk to them like that. Okay? And again, I'm not talking about being manipulative. Talk to them about the truth. They want to hear the truth. But be direct and to the point, and focus on bottom line results for them. The I's, these are the party people. These are the people who they like being in front. It doesn't matter what's going on, they want to be in front. These are the folks that they enjoyed group projects in high school. How many of you enjoyed group projects in high school? You're probably an I. How many of you, whenever a teacher said, okay, we're going to have a group project, you kind of just cringed a little bit inside? You are not I's. You are not I's. I's love being in front. They love it. And in fact, one of the famous I's, Pirates of the Caribbean. How many of you have seen Pirates of the Caribbean?
Just the first.
Captain Jack Sparrow, right? At the very beginning of the first movie, the British officer says to him, "You are the worst pirate I've ever heard of." Typical I response, "But you have heard of me." Mantra for an I is, as long as you're talking about me. Okay? So, if you've got group projects, let them lead them. Let them try new things. They like being out on the edge. Here's the thing you've got to work with an I. They want to have fun, and fun will become the point, not the results. That becomes a problem for an I. Okay? If you want to create a motivating workplace, obviously let them collaborate. Keep things in groups and praise them publicly. Just let them know how awesome they are, because they already know that. They just are looking for you to reinforce it. Okay? If you need to develop an I, you want to help them work with other people. Help them understand other people, how they impact other people. You want to give them leadership opportunities that put them in front that are possibly low risk at first. Give them every opportunity to succeed. Always be optimistic with an I. I've got a good friend who's an I, and he works for people who are not I's. It kills him. He'll come in with an idea and they'll say, well, you know, this might not work and that might not work. It sucks the life out of this guy. You can say the same thing to him by saying, man, I love that you came up with that idea. That is awesome. How did you come up with that? Let him talk through it. Then say, you know, had you thought about this and this? No, I didn't. They'll run off and they'll think you love the idea. But they'll know they've got to make changes. Okay? Don't be negative with an I. Sucks the life out of them. Avoid focusing on facts when you're working with I's. And emphasize teamwork. We're going to get to C's in a minute. C's love data. They love facts. I's don't. Tell stories. If you're working with a group of I's, tell stories. Okay? If you've got them working for you, you need to give clear direction, get them involved, creating a motivating workplace. Don't rush them. Don't rush them. I'm sorry, I skipped over I's. All right, let's go to S's. S's are the steady people. They're about 60% of the population, 60 to 70% of the population. And there needs to be more of them. These people keep peace. Okay? They keep things running. They keep things going. They are the people who are steady. For them, you need clear direction. Gradually give them more responsibility and let them know you're there for their support. They don't want to be up front, but you want to avoid rushing them. Okay? I I can tell you as a D who used to work for some S's, if you rush them, you will lose your job. That's the way it works. They don't like to be rushed. Don't paint them in a corner. Okay? Let them know changes are coming. Let them mentor others. Encourage them to take reasonable risks. And you need to offer reassurance when you're working with them. Be friendly with them. When you're working with an S, talk about what's going on in their life. Okay? They like things steady and consistent. They don't like change. C's. Almost all engineers, computer programmers, are C's. They like details. They like data. With a C, you don't want to talk to them in general terms. So, for instance, walking into a C's office and saying, hey, give me an idea what you think about this. Whoa, hang on. I got to get some data together. No, just tell me what you think. Oh, well, what are you going to do with this information? So, one way to help a C is to give them permission to fail. Say, hey, give me 50-50. What do you think? Give me your answer with 60% accuracy. What do you think is the best way to do? Okay. So now I can give you an answer. And even if it fails, well, that was my 40%. Okay? Things have to be logical for them. The thing you want to work with the C, they will get overly cautious. They will search for data forever before making a decision. C's and S's will spend their time looking for data before making a decision forever. Always be logical and emphasize accuracy over speed with them. It makes more sense to be accurate than to go fast. So, that's one of the steps we use. We try to get people knowing about other people on the team to help create trust. One of the other tools we use is called a personal histories exercise. And we ask these 3 questions around the group. Now, I want you to read those, and those feel pretty squishy, don't they? Here's why those are important. I had a team I was taking through this exercise, and they had a performer on this team who was not up to snuff. Fairly new, but at the same time not producing the way they wanted him to. We went through this exercise. Turns out the guy had some very high goals, and it also turned out that he was leaving home every day to go home and take care of a daughter who was brand new, nobody knew about. He also came from a childhood where he had been abused. He had a lot of things working against him. Now, none of that changed the need for him to produce results on the team. What it did do is it caused the team to think about him in a different way. He's not a slacker. He's climbing uphill. What can I do to help him get up the hill? It changed. The owner of that company came to me afterwards and said, I've got to do something different with that guy. Okay? And he became a performer instead of a slacker. All right, very quickly, and I know we're kind of running through this fast. We want to just kind of whet your appetite. 4 stages of team development. Forming, storming, norming, and performing. When we start out, we're forming the team. That's what the personal histories exercise is for. That's what the DISC exercise is for. There's some other exercises we go through. Then it gets hard. That's the storming part. And I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. You know, let's just go back. It was better back there. And there's some truth in that. It was better back there in some ways. But once you get through that point, things start to, you get a new normal, things start to seem right, and then you perform at a higher level than you ever could have possibly imagined. And we've seen that happen. You lose 20% of your team, you go back to forming. Okay? Rule of thumb, if 20% of your team leaves or changes, you go back to forming. Here's the thing, that trust, that foundation of trust, that really is the glue, that's the lubrication that allows you to move between those four states. Okay. That's the first part of building a cohesive leadership team. Let me take just a couple of minutes. Any questions? Comments, concerns, complaints? That all make sense? You see what I mean? That it's easy to understand. It takes a lot of persistence and discipline. In fact, Lencioni says it's uncommon persistence and discipline to make this work. Okay.